Hey guys, my name is Charles. For my project and my topic, I chose to talk about the stigma of mental illness and how arrogance of the subject is fueled by people's lack of education on the subject. And this is not just in the sense of younger education, but just general, any age, because even adults don't really even know about it. There's some out there who don't. So this is just a overall covers everybody kind of concept. First thing I want to talk about is an article I found. It's called "Eliminating Stigma is Key to Effectively Treating Mental Illness." Essentially, the couple key points I took from this was a little bit of statistics. One being that 43.8 million, which is 1 in 5 adults, are living with mental illness currently. And then the other one, which was a concept I had never come to learn about, which is interesting for being a psychology major and having taken some classes, but that one would be self-stigma, which is when an individual takes on and internalizes the attributes of societal stereotypes. So they pretty much just like inflect everything back on themselves. They create the stereotypes for themselves, which is obviously not a very good thing. My second source that I included is the article goes by Conceptualizing and Measuring Mental Stigma, the Mental Illness Stigma Framework, and Critical Review of Measures. Essentially, what I got from this article was that there's limitations and challenges of psychological and mental illness stigma literature, which, I mean, again, that's very true. There's a lot of it lacks clarity, and it's really too complex, and a lot of people, who don't have that education to begin with aren't going to really be understanding all these big words, so we have to be able to find ways to teach it in a way where everybody can understand. This article also mentions concepts of internalized, anticipated, and experienced stigma, and it also comes to the conclusion that there are essentially about 400 measures to show the ways stigma can be experienced. So I personally can only think of a couple, maybe a good handful, but to know that there's 400 different ways that stigma can be experienced is just beyond me, and to know what some of those could be and how more intense they could be than what I experienced is just unfathomable to me. The next article I included was one called National Academy of Sciences Releases Report on the Stigma of Behavioral Health, and this one was pretty interesting. It had a lot of information in it, and some of the things that I pulled from this was that there was 3 methods discussed in trying to reduce stigma and self-stigma, and those 3 being protest, contact, and education. The education approach would essentially include using books, flyers, media outlets, kind of like public service announcements or educational videos. The contact approach would involve bringing in someone who has experience and has been living with mental illness to pretty much help show the others and help them understand what mental illness is, and how to treat people who suffer from it properly. Make sure they're getting the proper treatment that they need, and then also they created to help those with mental illness issues and help those who stigmatize against those individuals what mental illness really is. They really bring the forefront. I feel like the contact approach would be very beneficial in all these. In a sense, you kind of need all 3 to kind of have the effect that you want to get, because if you teach them, sure, you can have the knowledge, but unless you see how it's applied by others who actually experience it, you're not going to really know how it works and how to work around it. My next article that I included for my research was Mental Health Promotion in Male-Dominated Workplaces, Perspective of Male Employees and Workplace Representatives. And I picked this because I feel like men are very underrepresented when it comes to mental illness. Especially generations before us, they were pretty much just about like not discussing it, pushing it off, just going about their lives, and that's pretty much just what makes mental health worse. So I felt this would be pretty appropriate, seeing it's about males in the workplace. And some of the things that I pulled from this article, figures and whatnot, were that most adults, working men, don't get help or assistance for their mental illness, which again I pretty much said that in the beginning of this little slide detail. This on average, though, will annually cost an employer about $6,700 for employees suffering from that mental illness. So like them having to take days off and whatnot, et cetera, like lack of production, things like that. And then this article also talked about an exercise where men were given cards with scenarios of like work and home life that could increase or decrease mental health. For example, good work-life balance, a positive workplace culture. And in all, after reading these cue cards and having these scenarios, they were instructed to sort the scenarios to their relevance and instructed to talk about their decisions after. This pretty much being to show there's no reason to have to feel shame in the way one thinks or one values, the things in their lives and their specific morals. For pretty much the last article, I'm going to include my source for this little video here is going to be titled Transphobia in the Workplace, a Qualitative Study of Employment and Stigma. And again, I picked something like this, something specific, just because I also feel, the transphobia and non-binary world, and, those people are really, really kind of beaten up when it comes to mental illness and stigma. They get the short end of the stick. Everybody looks at them as like they're completely different, almost freaks in a sense, because they feel the way they feel about their gender and sexuality. So I felt this would be a good one to include. What I got from this is that this side of mental health and stigma, again, doesn't get much attention. One of the biggest forms of discrimination, this just leads to a decline in their mental health. This article goes on to show that transgender and gender fluid individuals showed through questionnaires their experience with stigma, coping with stigma, internalization of stigma, and recommendations for future research and mental health services. And what they found was the first barrier for these individuals was the lack of social support in their workplace. And the next thing that they kind of listed as being the most discriminant was gender policies in the workplace. Their gender policies usually in most places deter or discriminate against transgender individuals for reasons they can't go into the bathroom of their choosing, and they can't really wear what they want because they'll just pretty much get attacked or not treated fairly like the rest of them. But pretty much my stance in the beginning of this was, obviously I'm very much for helping the stigma against this, and getting people educated is really going to be the only thing that helps really fuel the fire to make the stigma against mental illness better. And obviously after doing all this research and this presentation, I'm still in the same position. If not, I feel stronger, and I always will, and that's why I chose to go into psychology. Thank you guys for listening, and hope you enjoy the video.